Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Charlotte Regional Championship. I'm Jason Krell, living the dream here, getting to commentate with my good, smart friend, Tommy Coolene. How you doing, Tommy?
Doing all right. Having a pretty good day so far. Seeing some pretty cool matches, talking to some pretty cool people.
Yeah, and I think that we have a very cool match. I'm so excited about this one today. We have Brian Youm and Jake Muller, two very good players with some very interesting teams. But before we get into that, just to give you a little bit of background, both of these players have seen Top Cut before. Brian Top Cut Georgia Athens last year, which I think Charlotte kind of fills the role of, so we might get a little bit of history there with that good run. Obviously, he's currently 3-0. And then Jake has had a very good season so far. I mean, he started off well by top cutting the Anaheim Open. I think he made it all the way to top 4, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Yeah, so he made it to top 4. Then he did well at Fort Wayne, and he also top cut Dallas. So he's having a very good season, and honestly, I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, both of them are really, really strong players, and I think it's really interesting, like, just looking at the teams that they brought, because players of these caliber, and like you've seen that Jake has been playing more of like the standard like Charizard, Cresselia, Snorlax stuff.
Sure.
We've seen Brian play a lot of the Azumarill teams with the Salamence and the Amoonguss,
Right.
and those have been doing really, really well for both those players so far. But with
Something different today.
with the release of Incineroar, we got some really interesting teams.
Oh my goodness. So let's look at these teams because they do need some close examination. That is a Gastrodon, Bisharp, Incineroar, Tapu Bulu, Tapu Koko Salamence for Jake. And then Brian has the Manectric Tapu Fini, which we saw last game with the Cresselia, Incineroar, and that is a Lurantis and a Snorlax. So, wow, some certainly a defiant team choice from Brian.
Absolutely. Both of these teams have something that...
No, from Jake. Whoops.
Right, yeah. Both of these teams have something that when they get intimidated, their attack stat goes up. Lurantis has contrary ability, so instead of going down, the attack stat just goes up. Where with Defiant, of course, the attack goes down one stage and then gets boosted 2 stages, just because that's how Defiant works. And both players have teams that really, really want to bring the Incineroars to the opposing team. Lurantis, does take a lot of damage from Flare Blitz from Incineroar. It's going to almost certainly KO it. So interesting team choice, but have to be very, very careful about what we're using.
Well, let's see. We've got the leads now. Brian bringing the Cresselia and the Manectric, and we get to see that Bisharp nice and early for Jake's side alongside the Salamence. So Jake, he actually has set himself up for that Defiant to do work. Brian not bringing the Lurantis necessarily, and so the Salamence can intimidate without having to worry.
Yeah, big thing here is that Brian has to be worried about taking something like a knockoff and a double edge from the Salamence, since if he wants to intimidate the Salamence to get the intimidate on the Salamence, he has to worry about giving the Bisharp the attack boost. So either way, something's going to be boosted here, and something's going to be neutral, whether it be the Mence getting a neutral and the Bisharp getting a neutral attack off, or the Bisharp having a +1 attack and the Mence being at -1. Almost certainly the combination of the two should be enough to pick up a knockout on the Cresselia if Brian lets it happen.
Well, we see these Salamence go for the Mega Evolution, so it's giving up the Intimidate. Manectric stays in its regular form, just wants to get a Volt Switch off and do actually a very good amount of damage to that Bisharp, potentially breaking any kind of Focus Sash that is a common item. And now Brian, he does get to bring that Lurantis, though it certainly would be afraid of this flying type Salamence. And look at that beautiful shiny color. The return coming out, like you said, Tommy, into the Cresselia, and so now that knockoff is almost certainly in range, and that means, oh no, it holds on! Oh my goodness! And now the Ice Beam into the Salamence, that could almost certainly pick up the knockout, and oh no, that hangs on too! So wow, 2 very narrow survivals for both of these trainers.
Yeah, we don't see an item get knocked off the Cresselia. That's why the knockoff did not KO, and Cresselia hangs on with just a little bit of HP, probably denoting a Z move on the Cresselia, which is not the most common option. Lurantis also has to be worried about the Salamence. Jake's still in a pretty good spot despite the awkward turn. He could, fire off return, fire off knockoff. He's still like a pretty good play here.
Yeah, Lurantis wants to protect itself just in case, because the Salamence is gunning for it with the return, and now a knockoff will finish off this Cresselia, and that will mean that the Salamence will survive, doesn't have to worry about any more Ice Beams, and now Brian's going to have to reset and try and think of a new game plan.
Yeah, if he wants to bring in something like Manectric here, which he does, he has the option to go for the Mega Evolution if he wants. He has to worry about the Bisharp. He can just go for something like a Volt Switch into it. He has to worry about a potential Sucker Punch.
Yeah.
That would be a bit problematic. but if he does Mega Evolve, he can outspeed the Salamence and hit it with something like a Volt Switch or Hidden Power Ice, whatever he wants to go for. Pick up a knockout on the Salamence, so that the Lurantis is free to just fire off something like a Superpower into the Bisharp, which would definitely pick up the knockout, but also boost the Lurantis' attack and defense just because of how Contrary works.
Right, but then the question I think at that point is where are the speed tiers, because Lurantis is not the fastest Pokemon, and that could give the Bisharp a chance to get off a very powerful attack, because as we talked about, the Manectric will Mega Evolve, so now Bisharp drops one stage, but then goes back up 2 more, so it is at +1 attack stage. The Manectric does get weaker as well. Yeah, so there's that Define, a very good ability. And we see the Sucker Punch, so Jake does have that. And how much damage? Oh my goodness, doesn't quite get the knockout once again. And now Bisharp's moved, so it's just a sitting duck for this Lurantis if it has that superpower, which you gotta assume it does. And Brian also gets the added benefit of getting another chance to intimidate something and pivoting out to another Pokemon. Wow, so he gets the Incineroar, and so now Bisharp will be at +2, but in the long run, it doesn't matter. That thing is almost certainly going down if Brian has picked the right move for the Lurantis. And there it is, Superpower. So now he's starting to build some momentum on that. Now that the Salamence is gone, it isn't able to threaten with a super effective flying type attack. And if Jake has the Incineroar in the back, that's just going to boost its attack stat even higher with Contrary. And Jake might be in a bit of a pickle.
Yeah, if you're Jake, though, you probably want to have that Incineroar in the back because there isn't much else that can really deal with that Lurantis being able to pick up a knockout.
Right.
So he probably wants to bring it in anyways, as he does here. The Tapu Bulu is something interesting since, despite being weak to Incineroar, it can also just fire off something like a Superpower, a Stone Edge, something along those range. And Grassy MZ, if he decides to go for that, also still does a ton of damage to Incineroar.
Oh, and now we also get to play the Fake Out game, and so that's going to determine a lot about this next turn, whether there's protects, if someone's Incineroar is faster and fakes out the other one, that could honestly change the favor quite a bit.
Yeah, as long as Lurantis is able to, fire off more attacks and does not go down to that first Flare Blitz, which it shouldn't at this point. He looks like he's in a pretty decent spot. Lurantis can maybe carry him his way through the rest of the game.
Well, Brian wants to preserve his Incineroar, maybe get another Intimidate off. Well, and that's exactly what he does with the Manectric, so that's going to be huge here because both these Pokemon do not appreciate having their attack stat dropped, even though Manectric is on its last leg. Lurantis just protects, so it's going to be completely safe this turn, and that means Jake is going to get a chance to go for a Fake Out into that Protect, and the Tapu Bulu just going to set up with a Bulk Up, so now it's matching that defensive boost that Lurantis has, and Lurantis has the extra stage of attack thanks to the Contrary Intimidate, but Bulu certainly in a much better position to handle that Incineroar.
Yeah, the problem for Jake here is that Lurantis can just go for Superpower into the Incineroar and do a lot of damage. It's super effective, and it has the boosted stage of attack, so it's going to be in a really rough spot with the Incineroar if he loses it here.
Yeah, and plus, Incineroar is coming back in on Brian's side, so now that is a second Intimidate with another one potential in the back because the Manectric is still there hanging on in the red, and this is just going to become untenable because if Jake doesn't keep boosting his attack with that Bulk Up, he's not going to be able to do enough damage, and if he keeps attacking, he's eventually going to get weaker. But a Z-move from one of these Pokemon could change that. And that's from the Tapu Bulu. It's a all-out pummeling. That's huge.
Yeah, that's almost certainly calling the switch there into that Incineroar and going to try and pick up the knockout there. He might try and target down the Lurantis just because at this point in the game it's so much of a problem and he needs to find a way to KO it. And he does go into the Lurantis. He's likely going to try and double up here with a Flare Blitz and a all-out pummeling. But based off that damage output, it looks like a Flare Blitz might come up just a bit short.
Well, let's find out. That Flare Blitz is going into that slot, and Jake really needs this to KO. But no, the damage is not there. The only chance he has is a burn, and he does not get it. And another Superpower into the Incineroar takes it out, no problem, and just makes it even harder to KO. And I think with just Tapu Bulu, there's nothing left that Jake can do for this game.
I think he learned a decent amount of information there. He was able to, figure out that if you're not keeping that Salamence on the field for long enough, you're not going to be able to break through the Lurantis if it gets that initial Superpower off. So I think that's an important thing that we can take into game too, as he's almost certainly just going to go for the forfeit here, as he does. He just doesn't have a way to deal with Lurantis if he loses his Salamence and it gets a boost. Obviously, Incineroar can fire off a Flare Blitz and do tons of damage to the Lurantis, but if it ever just gets off a superpower first, it's really, really hard for him to kind of just bully his way through Lurantis because it's so bulky. It raises the defense stat really, really quickly, and he's just going to have to make a mental note that you need to save something to deal with Lurantis. He also learned about the Z move on the Cresselia.
Yep, that's important.
He doesn't know which one it is. You have to guess it's probably Psychium.
Yeah.
We see that it's kind of like a pseudo-mental herb.
Right.
Since you can use Trick Room with the Z move through something like Taunt. You can also just fire off a psychic type Z move, the Shattered Psyche, and just give Cress a little bit extra damage output.
Right, and so I think it'll be interesting to see if Jake thinks he can afford to keep his Ments in the back so he can preserve it for when that Lurantis comes out. But at the same time, if the Lurantis comes out first and then is able to start setting up those superpowers, it may still be too much of a problem, even for Salamence. So it's honestly a really tricky situation, and it's going to be interesting to see how Jake decides to navigate it. But I do think he's certainly capable of putting together a game plan. He's not out of it yet.
Well, the two Salamences that we usually see are either Dragon Dance or the Hyper Voice variant.
Right.
So it's usually one or the other. If it is the Dragon Dance variant, he can just match the Lurantis, since the Lurantis should be firing off Grass type and fighting type moves.
Yeah, doesn't have to worry about
which
it.
both don't do anything to Salamence, and then you just match it by Dragon Dancing, or you can be going for something like Hyper Voice, and then you're just ignoring the defense boosts.
Right. Well, okay, so we do see one change from Brian. Instead of the Manectric, he wants to bring the Incineroar. So he has Fake Out potential, but now the Bisharp is starting off right out of the gate with +1 attack stat. So Cresselia is certainly threatened, and Jake, knowing that he doesn't need the Salamence right now, he just wants to get this Incineroar in to fire off and intimidate and drop the other Incineroar's attack stat without the Lurantis on the field. So this was a very safe time to bring it in, and these two dark types are certainly threatening the Cresselia. Bisharp protects to preserve a potential Focus Sash, which we arguably haven't seen, and the Fake Out into that slot probably to pop that. But the problem is, Brian has a perfect opportunity to set up Trick Room, and even though both Incineroar and Bisharp are not the fastest Pokemon in the world, Brian's team has this Trick Room built in, so you have to assume his team is going to be naturally slower.
Yeah, Jake probably realizing there that he's not going to stop the Trick Room from going up, so you bring your own Incineroar to have Fake Out pressure in this first turn of Trick Room. So now the Bisharp can get an attack off either on this Lurantis that just came in, or the Cresselia, and hopefully get off some huge damage.
Well, and here is the Fake Out indeed onto the Lurantis slot. Didn't want to let the Incineroar get off an attack. Ice Beam into the Bisharp, not going to do a whole lot of damage, but it gets the freeze, and you hate to see that happen because he really needed that to get an attack right now. That is game-changing right there.
Yeah, if Jake was going for something like a knockoff into the Lurantis slot, like calling a switch there, he could have also just been going for a knockoff into the Cresselia. It looks like just as likely, but it's an absolutely fatal blow to Jake.
Yeah, and here's a helping hand, almost certainly a superpower. Both these dark types weak. Jake trying to get a Sucker Punch off, but he stays frozen. And let's see, this superpower hits the Incineroar. Can it hold on? No, it's just going down, and that means that the Lurantis is going to start its snowball. It looks like it's planned for Day 2 Worlds at this point, and Salamence is going to come out, and it could come out, but then that's going to just give it an even bigger attack stat, and we saw how much the Cresselia did with an Ice Beam last game.
Yeah, we saw in game 1 that Jake Salamence can take an Ice Beam from the Cresselia, so going for a Mega Evolution and trying to take one of those is probably his best play here. It's all riding on whether or not Bisharp can wake up, though, since if he's able to wake up, he can protect and not take us another superpower, and also won't give the Lurantis another defense boost. I think he needs to try and stop that at all costs here.
That's one of the hardest things to do too, because freeze is such a weird mechanic in comparison to other statuses. You just have it's a flat 20% to unthaw every turn. So Jake really rolling the dice here, but he's gonna need he does not get what he needs, and so Bisharp stays frozen, and the superpower will almost certainly take it out. No, actually going to the Salamence, so that's not very effective at all, but it does give it another boost, and it will be quite hard to KO. Actually, so yeah, he was probably just trying to chip it so that this Ice Beam got the knockout.
Yeah, and with that KO, unless Bisharp is able to wake up like this turn, Jake is not going to be able to just keep up with the Lurantis. He needs to probably wake up, and even needs a crit most likely at this point, because he needs to be able to fire off something like a Sucker Punch or a knockoff into the Lurantis. At this point in the game, it's probably just going to go for another superpower into the Bisharp. So two options here being that he can go for Protect with the Bisharp, hope he's on thaws, and maybe just go for like all-out pummeling into Lurantis, try and chip it into range of Bisharp.
Right.
But if Bisharp does not wake up this turn, which
Yeah,
it
there it
doesn't,
is. This is almost certainly going to be the game, or close to it. As Superpower hits the Bisharp, we'll take it down now that it's boosted straight through the sky. Plus, it's 4 times super effective. And Laurent is really being the star of the show in this game, and that's a Pokemon that obviously introduced in Gen 7 you never really see before. Also worth noting that the Cresselia is in a good position to do a lot of damage to the Tapu Bulu, but it does have Horn Leads to try and stay in it. But I mean, Brian's got all 4 of his Pokemon, hasn't even revealed his 4th, and I just don't think it's gonna matter.
Yeah, at this point in the game, he needs something like all-out pummeling, critical hit on the Lurantis. He'd need to crit the Superpower on the Incineroar when it came back in. We don't even know what his last Pokemon is. It could be Manectric, it could be Feeny. All those things are going to eventually beat the Tapu Bulu, since once Grassy Terrain runs out, he wouldn't be able to recover enough with Horn Leech. So we are just going to see Jake forfeit there. And really unfortunate game 2. The Ice Beam Freeze is never something you want to see.
No.
But Brian able to just take that Ice Beam Freeze and capitalize on it, and had a very, very safe game plan there, as long as Bisharp stayed frozen, which it did.
Right.
Credit to Brian, he played a well-played game. It's just that, unfortunate sometimes that you have to win that way.
Right, exactly. I mean, life comes at you fast, and even faster when you have a Pokemon that's able to just keep boosting itself while doing damage output, and that's the power of Lurantis. And honestly, I think it raises questions. I'm sure this isn't the only Lurantis that's at the tournament today, and it raises questions. Now that Intimidate Incineroar is such a thing, and obviously Landorus, Therian is such a popular Pokemon, is Lurantis a really viable option now?
Yeah, if you're able to, fire off those superpowers on Incineroar consistently, then maybe absolutely at that point. But Lurantis, being so slow, it's really, really hard to guarantee that you're actually going to get superpowers off onto Incineroar. So we'll see how it does. It's doing well today. It's at 4-0 already.
Yeah,
so.
And I think that, that Z-move crest may help, because then you can kind of have a better chance of getting the Trick Room off and making sure you can start boosting up. But yeah, that was quite the wild set for round 4, and I think we are going to take a quick break and talk to Brian about how he is feeling after his win, and now that he's 4-0. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back, everybody. We are here with Brian Youm. Congratulations on your win. The man with the Lurantis, the first one that we got to see on stream. And I think the first place I want to start is what made you decide to go with that Pokemon?
So I was actually in the MPA Cruisers chat trying to build a team with something that actually, I was trying to team build with Azumens, but the double Intimidate really made me struggle with team building.
Sure.
Because but my friend Unsana on Showdown actually suggested me an idea of running Lurantis, because it now gets access to knockoff, superpower, and it can actually get use of contrary. So I was like, hey, this is actually really nice. It beats Landorus 1v1. It can OHKO Incineroar at +1. I can live with Flavorless because I'm too intimidated. I'm like, hey, let's try that. And I was like, I actually built the team 6 minutes before registration ended.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, so how is it working out so far? Because you're 4-0. Obviously, it's working well, but has Lurantis been what's carrying you through in all these games, or has it been a combination?
So Lurantis is like a Heatran. Heatran has 25% automatic win matchup, 75% if you're a bad matchup. Lurantis does the same. It can be so good against double Intimidate if I can position myself well in Trick Room. That was the big example of, I guess this here, but I don't know if...
Sure.
But, yeah, Lurantis pretty much carried me in round 1.
Right.
Did really well. I wanted to bring it, but people were actually scared of it more than Snorlax. I was like, hey, why?
Oh, yeah. No, that's a good point. You certainly have answers for that. So I want to say, because of the freeze in Game 2, we didn't quite get to see, I think, your full game plan. You were able to just kind of just blow over Jake there. But you know, what were you planning to do, assuming things didn't quite go that direction?
Well, I was thinking that I possibly could lose game 2, so I really wanted to guarantee Trick Room up and bring something that can damage. Like first, my plan first one is kill Bisharp. That thing is troubling me for sending in Intimidates.
Right.
Second plan was basically if I kill Bisharp, I can pretty much let Cycle Intimidates and let Rentis do its job because the Rentis is actually fairly bulky.
Yeah.
It's 70 base HP, 90 defense and special defense, I think.
That's good.
And I carry a lot of bulk on it, so I can actually live a lot of things at and opponents -1.
Nice.
So yeah, the whole purpose of Lurantis is to actually just punish, intimidate users. Like, if I get +1, if I use Helping and Superpower, I'm pretty sure I can OHKO Snorlax.
Wow, that's a lot. At +1 or even without? Yeah, probably need to be at least +1 for that, right?
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure if I'm +1, if I get in on Intimidate and make Lax +5, I can pretty sure be able to return, I guess.
Wow, that is impressive, and definitely something that you will want to keep in mind when dealing with Lurantis in the future, because I can imagine it's only going to get more popular going forward. But now that you're 4-0, how are you feeling about the rest of the tournament?
I'm feeling really nervous right now because last time at Memphis Regionals, I was 5-0 and got on stream with Colin, won, but I lost 3 matches in a row. So I really would have cut, but But I'm hoping to do better.
Sure.
Because I came in this regional with a better mental. I'm doing this for fun, not for I'm gonna not stress it.
Yeah.
But I'm here to meet friends, have fun, meet great commentators like you, Krell.
Well, thank you so much, and I think that's why we all love playing Pokemon, is the community, and it certainly helps you have fun when you're winning. So I hope that things go a little bit different than Memphis. You're able to keep your streak going, and maybe we'll see you back tomorrow in Top Cut.
I'll try my best. My aim today, today is to get my Rosenbite. I'm 32 points away.
Okay.
I'll try my best.
Let's get it. I think we can get there. And thank you guys for watching this wonderful interview. And we'll be back with round 5 eventually. I think there's a lunch break coming up, and we're gonna do that soon. So we'll be back. Don't go anywhere.
Maybe I can finally sleep now.
There you go.